Welcome to Our Environment, a video series focused on Two Rivers land, wildlife, and waterways. Brought to you by the City of Two Rivers Environmental Advisory Board. Join us as we sit down and talk with local environmental experts about improving our quality of life through resiliency and sustainability.
So good morning this morning and welcome to the 11th annual Lake Michigan Day. So today, as most of you probably know me, I'm honored and privileged to be the Executive Director of Lakeshore Natural Resource Partnership. So hopefully, if we haven't met today, make sure you stop by and say hello. And also, let's have a big round of applause for the beautiful Wisconsin Maritime Museum. We're lucky to have this event here. We oftentimes at LNRP have board meetings here, different meetings. Our board retreat will be here and so on. You don't get to be at too many meeting places and have a large sub parked next door. So we're really delighted. The only thing we need now is more room. We may have outgrown this. So thank you so much for your participation today. We want to start today too with our land acknowledgement statement. So we acknowledge that what is now known as Eastern Wisconsin as part of the ancestral homeland of the Menominee Nation. We recognize the Menominee as well as more recent nations that have lived and thrived on this land and that we love and celebrate. As we work to cultivate conservation, collaboration, and community, we recognize the indigenous peoples as the original and longest serving members, caretakers of this land. We respect their traditional ecological knowledge and reverence for the natural world and seek to honor those values and priorities as we continue to steward the shared land and water of Wisconsin's amazing lakeshore region. This is the amazing planning committee. So if you were on our event planning committee today, if you'd like to just stand up for a minute and let's give them a big round of applause. So we have Patricia, and we have Deidre, we have Jeff, we have Anna, we have Amy, we have Bridget and Jake. So these guys have put in countless hours over the last 6 months putting this event together. So once again, big round of applause for our planning committee. These are our event sponsors. Without these organizations, corporations, we wouldn't be able to put this event on at all. So we have Climate Change Coalition. Jeff is the Executive Director. Sweetwater with Jake. Sea Grant, which Deidre represents. We have the Wisconsin Coastal Management Program, LNRP. Stantec has been very generous, as well as Mergent. Johnson's Nursery, they just put together an amazing display out front. If you want to check out their greenery. NOAA, and obviously Fun for Lake Michigan as well. So let's give our sponsors a big round of applause. So next we'll have a short message from the governor.
Hey there, folks. Governor Tony Evers here. Thank you for inviting me to join you for Lake Michigan Day. Here in Wisconsin, we're fortunate to have more than 800 miles of Great Lake shoreline that provide fresh water and recreation and improve the quality of life for folks all across our state. From Washington Island to Kenosha and everywhere in between, Lake Michigan and our coastal communities serve as a critical gateway to our state. They provide countless jobs and opportunities for trade and commerce and make our state the beautiful place it is for residents and visitors alike to enjoy. Unfortunately, as all of you know, the lake has experienced shoreline erosion, flooding, pollution, and the everyday harmful effects of climate change. My administration shares your commitment to protecting our bountiful freshwater resources and ensuring our Great Lakes are protected for years to come. Recently, I was glad to announce more than $1.3 million in annual grants went out to coastal communities across the state through our Coastal Management Grant Program. This program focuses on projects that restore local habitats, build flood and climate resilience, and expand public access to our Great Lakes. From restoring and revitalizing wetland habitats to reducing flood risk and increasing flood resilience to building ADA accessible kayak launches, these grants will help support incredible work being done along Lake Michigan. I've also been proud to support efforts to remove contaminated sediment in Lake Michigan, Lake Superior, and their tributaries, to fund upgrades to the Great Lakes research vessels to continue the DNR's fish data collection efforts, and to provide support to farmers and promote sustainable farming efforts to reduce runoff into our water resources. Additionally, wild rice has been harvested in the Great Lakes region for thousands of years. We know that this resource is threatened by the effects of changing climate and water quality. That's why my administration was proud to work with the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission and the Menominee and Lakota tribal nations to secure funding to support research and development strategies to conserve wild rice in Wisconsin. We're also working with NOAA, UW Green Bay, and the Oneida Nation on Great Lakes restoration projects and designating Green Bay as a National Estuary Research Reserve site. Folks, Wisconsin's Great Lakes are core to our economy, our history, our culture, and who we are as Wisconsinites. And these are just a few of the efforts we're taking to ensure we protect them for generations to come. Thank you for your partnership and work in these efforts. I look forward to our continued work together. I hope you have a wonderful time at the 11th Annual Lake Michigan Day. Thank you and take care, folks.
I'm pretty confident that several things that Governor Evers had mentioned, some of you in this room have benefited from. So it's great to have that support. It's great to continue to seek that support from the state as well as local funders. And we can't do that work as nonprofit organizations without that type of support. So we're delighted to have Governor Evers and his administration on board as well. So Sarah Smith is a citizen of the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin and works as the Midwest Tribal Resilience Liaison with the College of Menominee Nation Sustainable Development Institute in association with the Midwest Climate Adaptation Science Center. As a liaison for the Midwest, she works on facilitating stronger relationships between tribes, climate researchers, organizations, academic institutions, and the MWCASC. In addition, she works with tribes to build capacity and provide support by helping identify gaps and assisting with climate resilience efforts.
All right, so Segu Swahiku, Sarah Smith Nyungyats, Oniotiaga Na'i, Okalewa Guapo, Niwagadaloda. Hello everyone, I'm Sarah Smith, citizen of the Oneida Nation, and I am Wolf Clan. I'm really honored to be here today with you all, to see your beautiful faces, and to talk about the Tribal Climate Adaptation Menu. Today, I wanted to share with you this Tribal Climate Adaptation Menu. So the title of it is Debagan Jigadeg Anishinaabe Ezitwad. So you all should know what that means, right? So for those who don't speak Anishinaabe, and I'm still a very early learner as well, the rough translation is doing things the Anishinaabe way. And when you break down Anishinaabe, that means the original people. So one of the things that I like to mention right away is that when we're talking about the natural world, we're talking about our relatives. And so I prefer using the term relatives over resources or natural resources because that's essentially what they are. And when we think about them as relatives and not resources, we see them in a different way, right? So you're not going to go to your grandma's house and just extract everything she has from there. You're gonna go there with respect. You're gonna build that relationship, right? And you're gonna get to know her. And so that's what we also want to do with our relatives who are on the landscape, whether that be the four-leggeds, the waters, our relationship with fire. They're all of our relatives. And so decisions for our relatives used to be communal decision making. And today a lot of that is top-down decision making from bureaus, agencies, and such. And so this has really changed the way we do our work on the landscape and our relationship we have. And so when we want to do climate change work or environmental work, we really need to think about them in a way that respects who they are, respects their agency as a being, and then that way we can learn from them and make better progress. So, who here works on climate change or has been affected by climate change? Okay, all the hands should be up. So climate change impacts every part of our lives, whether we know it or not. One of the big ones we're seeing in our region is loss of winter. And what does that mean? This last winter, we saw that clearly. We had very little snow, very little ice. Our ice cover on the Great Lakes has declined over 70% and that has also impacted our inland waters too. I know for in the back it might be a little hard to read, but my slides will be available later. The image on the right is from the 5th National Climate Assessment, which I was really fortunate to work on. And so we talked about things such as services, benefits, and activities that are being impacted due to climate change on our ice-covered inland lakes and waters. So this year, I wasn't able to go ice fishing. Are there any ice fishers in the room? A few of you? Okay. I wasn't able to go out this year, and that was really devastating because I really like it. I've only been ice fishing for a couple of years now, but it's a lot of fun. And for tribes, it's really important for their culture, their identity, their subsistence living too, and just who we are as people. And so that's being greatly impacted by climate change. Another one is precipitation events. So we're seeing more and more extreme precipitation events in our region. One of the examples I like to show is are these two photos on the right-hand side. So this was 2016 in Bad River. This is Highway 2. And so for those who remember, it was really devastating for those up there, especially the Bad River Reservation and their community. I actually drove on this during the storm, going to a climate change event, ironically. So at some point in the night, it let go. But we're seeing these 100-year storms more and more often, such as the one in 2018 that hit Bad River again. So we're seeing this more and more. Tribal communities are being impacted greatly because some of them, like Bad River, have these major highways and that's their only way in and out. So flying elders to dialysis, things like that are needed. And with these storms happening over and over again, we're not able to build that infrastructure up enough to make them resilient in time. So that's a really big issue that we're facing here in Wisconsin and in the Midwest region. Like Mike mentioned, erosion is also happening. So this is up in the Bay Mills community in the UP. So when we think about erosion, sometimes we don't think about it here, but it's great having a room full of people who are here for Lake Michigan Day, because erosion is a big part of that. So this is up on Lake Superior, but the two images are of the same location. So 2017, this is what the campground looked like, and you can see that the shoreline is being eroded. What you don't, well, and I can show you in the next picture, but so 2017 and then 2023. And you can see quite the difference between those years. What you can also see, possibly, is right here along the edge of the water. That used to be a road. And so if you think about that, there used to be a road you could drive on, then there was shoreline on the other side, right? So this erosion has been happening quickly over the years. So it's impacting their campground, which is electric too, so that's a major issue with water. They're not friends. But then also, if you were standing looking this way, if you were to turn the other way, you would see that one of their cemeteries is getting eroded into Lake Michigan. And it is a very old cemetery, and at this point, you know, it's so old that there's no way they can move it. So their relatives are literally washing away into Lake Superior. And it also touches on sovereignty. You know, they're losing their land as well. So that's just a very brief overview of how climate change is impacting tribes. And there's so much more I can say about it too. And you know, I just don't have the time to go into that much detail. But every tribe has their own climate story, right? And I think sometimes we forget that, you know, Indigenous people aren't just one people, right? We're peoples. Each tribe has its own story, their own challenges. We're seeing, you know, our relatives moving across the landscape and leaving our reservations or our ceded territories, and we can't move with them, right? So how does that impact our identity? How does that impact our subsistence living? And that's affecting people in this room too, right? Moose is leaving our region because it's getting too warm and there are too many ticks. And so we really need to think about that when we're doing our work. And that's what makes Indigenous communities so unique in climate change, is because we are fixed on reservations and ceded territories. That wasn't the case beforehand, right? Before colonization happened. So it impacts our relationships with these relatives on the landscape who are changing, who are decreasing in populations because of climate change, and who might be lost due to climate change. And so the work that I do is really important in helping build that tribal capacity with those in our region. And we have liaisons across the United States as well doing the same work. So the menu itself is primarily for the use in Indigenous communities, but also for non-Indigenous partners, for those wanting to work with tribes or work with tribes better. It's really trying to help bridge that communication barrier. So in the beginning, we have a guiding principles section on how to some best practices for engaging with tribes, and it's designed to be used across diverse ecosystems and scales and different values.
The next panelist we have is Jeff Ludsey. He is the Executive Director of the Climate Change Coalition of Door County. And he's also a staff member at LNRP, leading climate education and action in Door County. He volunteers and serves on the boards of directors of the Ridges Sanctuary, Destination of Door County, and the Door County YMCA. Very ambitious man. He received a mechanical engineering degree from Northwestern University in 2002, where he works on nuclear reactor design, testing, and training, supporting the U.S. Navy through 2015, and organic pasture-based farming through 2022. And then our final panelist of the day is Marco Marquez. He is the Wisconsin State Director of Organizing for ACE, which stands for Action for the Climate Emergency. Marco leads young people in the fight for their future by giving them the skills, training, and resources they need to become powerful climate activists. Marco has organized young people in many movement spaces, but is very passionate about protecting our land, air, and water. Marco lives in Milwaukee and enjoys the beauty of Lake Michigan every single day. So with that, I will ask our first question. Some of these questions will be positive, light, a little airy for the day, and some are going to be a little more difficult for the panelists. So the first one airs on that nice light side. Kind of based on the work you do or even your personal experiences, what is the biggest conservation or climate opportunity you see? Who would like to begin?
I can go.
Sure.
All right, testing. Okay, maybe.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, it's got to be really close. All right, hi everybody. If we want to think about how we're going to address climate change, obviously we have to do several things. We have to limit and reduce and ultimately get our use of fossil fuels down to zero. But we got to figure out how we're going to keep the lights on, so we have to expand renewable energy as well. But we also have to protect our carbon sinks, our natural carbon sinks. Everyone thinks about deforestation and thinks about that happening in the Congo or in Brazil in the Amazon. But there's deforestation issues happening here in Wisconsin as well. Of course, like those are the main three things we need to focus on, but politics gets in the way of doing a lot of very common sense things. And I think the biggest opportunity we have in this state to address climate change and really start to see momentum build on some of these key issues is the governor's budget happening next year. So it's the biggest piece of legislation in this state. And it's going to be a huge opportunity for us to put our money where our mouth is. Wisconsin has had a surplus for several years now. That's our money. And I tell this to all the students that I work with every single day. There's money that's taken out of our paychecks wherever we're working to go to the state and to go to the federal government. And they have a surplus. They're sitting on at least $3 billion that could be going towards amazing things like renewable energy, electrifying school buses, making sure that we have incredible battery storage, but it's not doing anything right now. And this doesn't have to be a partisan issue. ACE is completely nonpartisan. We're not allowed to endorse any candidates or any political party. But if we can get a majority of people in the state legislature that care about Lake Michigan, that care about our future, that care about our land, our water, and air, and so many people do, but if we're able to get a majority of people to stand up for those things, we can really start to see some big movement on the climate front. So I think that's one of the biggest opportunities we have coming up in January of 2025.
Great, thanks Marco. I would say biggest opportunity on the climate front to me is just public opinion on the word climate and on the concept. 10 years ago, if you surveyed people outside of this room or inside of this room, and Yale Climate Communications is one of my favorite communications group relating to climate. 10 years ago, if you asked the question, is climate change real? Are we humans the cause of it, and can we do anything about it realistically? The answers to those were 30 and 40%. Today, those numbers are 60 and 70%. And so, to me, the biggest opportunity is that we're all here at a conference that, of course, is about conservation and about invasive pulls and tree planting and all these great things, but it's also about climate. And that title, that word is in the title, and that word is in all of our strategic planning. So it's the fact that we publicly are saying the word climate, we are aware that it's a problem, we are aware we can do something, and we have all kinds of tools and techniques to do it, and we're doing it. So to me, it's that public opinion has changed. We're all talking about it, we're all talking to the people that aren't talking about it, which makes it so we can get to the policy related things. So when all of our leaders are making kind of higher level regulations and policies, both climate and conservation are a little bit more forward. So I'm really excited about that. That's my favorite opportunity right now.
So to build off what they both mentioned, because I think what they mentioned is really important, I will add one, which is our food system. So for Indigenous people, food sovereignty is a really big movement in our communities. but it's also important in all of our communities as well when it comes to where does our food come from, who's growing it, what kind of scale we're eating at, where, is it coming from Florida, is it coming from, our neighbor. I think the food system is a really big impact to our climate, and it's been shown that the way we do our agriculture today has been really detrimental to our environment and contributing to the change in our climate. And so what I like to do, I have a very small garden at my house. I try to grow food. Doesn't always work very well. But I'm also trying to support our farmers markets, our local producers, and supporting them instead of bigger commercial brands where they're not caring that much about our environment or the practices or pollution that they're contributing to. So I think that's another big issue in terms of climate change.
Awesome, thank you all. I think those are all really amazing opportunities for us, and hopefully in the near future we can actually turn those into realities. For the next question, it's kind of the flip of that. What do you see as some of the biggest challenges we're facing related to climate change? Sarah, would you like to go first?
Well, I kind of mentioned some of the I guess the one I'll bring back up is one of the biggest challenges is our extreme precipitation events that are happening. We're seeing that our region is going to get more wet into the future, but that doesn't mean nice general wetness or rainfall events. It means big dumps of rain or snow or rain on snow events. And that's going to really impact our ecosystem. It's going to impact our aquifers. It's going to impact all the relatives, us, everything we do. So these major precipitation events and loss of winter are some of the biggest challenges I think we're going to be facing.
Great, thank you. I think the two biggest challenges I see, one is human psychology. When I think of climate, we were born with what mom and dad taught us, what our schooling taught us, and we weren't taught to think that we humans could change the temperature of the earth that would have all these impacts to us. And so that's a generational change, and it's really hard to make that change in opinion that we are not, that we're not as humble and small as we thought. We're a humanity, and we have a really big impact on our planet in a way that you wouldn't have thought was possible, or that you didn't think was possible. So human psychology to me is the biggest one, and we're working on that. The second challenge I think is that all of our solutions are small and local. No matter how big this room is, and we pack this room with 100 people, we still, by me changing my carbon footprint to the acceptable for Earth's 8 billion people and for Door counties or for this regions to do that, it's still not enough because we have policies and systems and 20-year decisions that have us on coal and natural gas still. And so those were like one of the biggest challenges I know is we have to all band together to slowly make those changes from coal and natural gas to not just a little more renewable, but like quite a bit more renewable. And so we have to make that change as a system and as voters, kind of banding together with all of our leaders.
I'll build on what both of you said. The fossil fuel industry is a big opposition to the work that we want to do. Like Jeff was mentioning, there's 2 large coal plants in Oak Creek, just south of Milwaukee, run by We Energies. Now they announced maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, I'm not exactly sure when, that they were going to shut down those coal plants, which is great, that's awesome, but they said they're going to replace it with natural gas. And in doing that, they're going to raise the rates that they will charge to energy users to pay for the investments needed to transition it from coal to natural gas. And so this is going to hurt consumers, but also it's going to affect the health of the people living nearby, but also the health of the planet. Burning coal creates carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas, we know that. burning natural gas creates methane, which is so much stronger than carbon dioxide at trapping heat and keeping it in our atmosphere. So the fossil fuel industry, they want to make sure that their interests, which is their bottom line, is not being put in jeopardy. But I work with high school students, college students from all different parts of the state, and they are really, really encouraging me today on Lake Michigan Day to talk about the Line 5 pipeline as well. So it is a 70-year-old oil pipeline, Canadian oil pipeline, that goes through Native American land in northern Wisconsin. Sarah had pictures from in her presentation of the Bad River tribe and how we saw those horrible 500-year storms, and we saw it happen twice within 5 years. The pipeline goes through the Bad River Reservation, and all of that erosion from these torrential downpours and very unnatural weather patterns has eroded the land, and now the pipeline is exposed. It is quite literally exposed to the air, almost hanging in the air if the land keeps eroding away beneath it. And then, because this is a Lake Michigan issue, that pipeline goes underwater in Lake Michigan, in the Straits of Mackinac. It's 70 years old. It's run by Enbridge, a Canadian oil company who is responsible for the 2010 Kalamazoo oil spill, the worst oil spill, inland oil spill in U.S. history. And not a lot of people know about that. Not a lot of people know about that issue. But like Jeff was saying, everything is local. When people think, how can we work together to stop climate change? There's fossil fuel projects in all of our neighborhoods, in all of our communities, in our state, and that's the biggest fossil fuel project in our state. So we're doing a lot of work to make sure we're pushing back against the fossil fuel industry and making sure that people are aware of these issues, but at the same time, we understand that if we do transition away from fossil fuels, what does that mean for the workers who are working for Enbridge, or the workers who are working for We Energies at the coal plant or the soon-to-be natural gas plant? What does it mean for them? How do we make sure that when we are transitioning our economy to something that's going to be safe, clean, and cheap, that we're bringing along and uplifting families who have been relying on those industries to support their own families? So it's a tough issue for sure. This is not something that we can solve with just a couple swipes of a pen, because if it were, it'd be done already. But these are complicated issues, but I think at the very least we need to have open and honest conversations about what's happening and what our leaders can do to address some of these things that we care about the most.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and like you guys said, you brought up that local aspect, and there is local work being done from those within the room, across the state, federally and internationally. But one of the things with the kind of course of action we've been taking and the work that everyone is doing, can we avoid maybe the most severe effects of climate change with our current course of action? If we are a little negative regarding that, could we see changes maybe in the future if we take maybe a bigger leap with that course of action, if we more aggressively start to kind of combat climate change and the effects of it? Sorry, it's a loaded question.
I think currently where we're at, I think we'd all agree where we have a carbon footprint that is massive. We're coming to a realization. So on our current state of affairs with fossil fuels burning the way it is, we know that's not going to work. That's not sustainable. The way we produce food, not sustainable. But to me, the trajectory of opinion change makes it so we can be, and that's a feeling, and that's an optimism, and that's a faith. But the fact that we're in this room and we're all open-minded and we're learning and we're capable of changing our opinions or opening up our mind to know that there's solutions we don't know about, it makes me know that even though we're not currently on the plan, we're on a potential trajectory that I believe we can make the change.
Yeah, that's quite a loaded question. I think if we are keeping to our status quo, it's going to get very bad. And that's what it's projected to look like if we don't change our actions. I think one of the biggest challenges, like Jeff was saying, is this public opinion, our mindset on climate change, it's not a political issue, it's an environmental issue. And these changes that are needed to help combat climate change, you know, we want to be doing them in a good way. You know, uplifting families who might be impacted by transitioning energies or food systems, right? We need to make sure our people are, you know, safe and have money to support their families. But it's really getting people's perspectives to change about not just the individual, but our collective communities. I think that's one of the mindsets that a lot of people have is, and I understand it too, is making sure you're safe, your family's safe, and we need to be more community collaborative and thinking large scale in order to make that difference. So we're not looking to doom and gloom.
No, I don't really have anything.
So, as we kind of talked about some of those biggest challenges we're facing, I'm sure everyone in this room could list off multiple negative effects of climate change. But I want to challenge you guys and ask you to put on a different lens, potentially, and tell us if you think there could be any positive impacts of climate change. If we can't think of any, you are allowed to just say, nope, it's just doom and gloom for us.
I think one thing that I've witnessed firsthand is that climate change has offered young people an amazing opportunity for them to find their voice and to realize that, you know, things aren't hopeless and they can really do make an impact. And I think that climate is an issue that is opening up a lot of people's eyes to the beauty of the environment and the beauty of our natural resources like Lake Michigan. And it's driving the urgency of our need to protect it. So I think that's one good thing. Obviously, you know, my grandma would say that Wisconsin having softer winters is not a bad thing to her. But you know, change is part of nature. The planet has been changing every single day that it's been in existence. And, you know, I always get worried and like have a lot of anxiety about, oh my God, like, you know, our winters are changing, our lakes are changing, our forests are changing, the plants that are here are changing. But like the planet will find a new equilibrium. It'll figure itself out. I just hope that humans are a part of that equilibrium, that the changes aren't so drastic that, you know, we see huge detriments to us as a society. So of course, I worry about the planet. I worry about all the people that are on it and all the living things. But I feel like it's us that we need to worry about the most, because the planet, she's strong. She'll protect herself.
Nice. That's an interesting, really honest question. Are there any positive effects to climate change and heating up? The first direction I went with that is a kind of a sciencey answer from all my reading, all my projections that I've read and learned about is, yeah, there will be areas in the world that have probably better growing conditions. You know, you think of Canada and you think of Russia and places that are pretty darn cold that have really small growing seasons. Yeah, there might be some local and actually like a lot of acres that are better. But deep down, we also in this room as conservationists know nature can't change that fast. So all the insects and all the trees and all the animals can't change that fast. We humans can change that fast, but there'll be so many other negative effects to it. So I think about it in a science way. I like Marco's answer the best though. Like the biggest silver lining is that we and all the young people and all the young spirited people in this room realize that, oh, there's a new problem. We all got to work on it together, and there's new voices and new energy and new leadership that happens because of it. And also a new awareness that we're actually way more powerful than we thought. Like we didn't know, we didn't grow up thinking we could change the planet in such a negative way or a positive way, but apparently we're a lot more powerful than we thought. So So there's a couple of weird, maybe silver linings or something.
Yeah, I guess the one I was the two I was gonna mention, they've already stated. But yeah, I think this opportunity for all of us to come together on this common cause that is impacting all of us, may be a silver lining to cross those boundaries, whether they may be political, religious, racial, all those that tend to divide people. This is a common issue no matter who you are, that it's going to impact. So it's giving us this opportunity to see if we can actually come together, or if we're just going to, let it happen.
Awesome, thank you guys. Those were really, really great answers to all the questions we've had. I just have one last one before we open it up to the public, or to the audience here. And it kind of takes it back to you guys and the work you guys are all doing. So what's one key message you would like to share with everyone here related to the work your organization is doing? Yes, Sarah, you had a wonderful presentation already, so.
Yeah, I guess I can start. So for those doing work, making sure your Indigenous partners are part of that work as well. Whether they, if there's a reservation near you, or those who have been removed from those lands, all this land is Indigenous, and we all, no matter what your background is, you are all Indigenous from somewhere. Right, you might be very far removed. Maybe you're 6 generations Irish from Ireland, right? But everybody was Indigenous to somewhere at one point, and it's trying to reawaken that knowledge that may be very dormant in some folks. But then also, uplifting and supporting our Indigenous peoples who are being impacted, a lot. Some people say frontline community. I don't really like that term. But making sure if you are going to work with them that they're at the table from the beginning and not just a checkbox later on.
Awesome. I would propose, well, first a quick introduction. Yeah, what we do in Door County, the Climate Change Coalition, is climate education. That's bringing in speakers, some of them in this room, and bring in speakers to discuss about a topic relating to climate. We also do climate action, so we work on the big plant, trying to plant 10,000 trees every year, work with anybody that is out there, and that's churches and friends groups and every business that'll do it. Relating to the question, I'd say the advice or the proposal I have, lean in, talk, work on win-wins. Whatever actions are out there relating to your conservation work or your climate work, look at the win-wins that are out there to bring more people in the room than are in your little room as is right now. Work on coalitions, work on partnerships, and talk about what you care about. The way we normally get work done, and all of us, is not all science. It's tell the story about climate. Tell the story about your favorite tree or bird that's not going to make it, and that's why you're planting a new one, because you really care about that, and all the ripple effects to that. So lean into it and tell your story.
For us, working with students is really rewarding. They see a lot about climate change on social media, but on social media, lots of things can be doom and gloom. And so if they're only seeing that, and they don't know what to do with all of the energy and passion that they have for the issue, it can quickly turn into hopelessness. And that can happen to all of us. If you care so much about one thing, but you feel like you can't impact it, then that's where hopelessness creeps in. And so organizations like ours, that's what we're trying to do, is give young people an outlet and show them, no, like, you can impact things happening right here in your own city, in your own county, in this state, or even in this country. I had one student in Waunakee, just north of Madison. He was so passionate, he decided to single-handedly, almost kind of force the Wanakee Village Board to adopt a sustainability plan. And he just did it all through his own work. I can't take any credit at all except just telling him, yes, you should do that. It's just amazing to see the things that these young people can do. They can hold their own, talking to Governor Evers, talking to President Biden, talking to the DNR, talking to the Army Corps of Engineers, talking to Josh Call. We've met with all those people, like the actual people, not just people from their staff, and these young people are incredible. So our goal, we have about 200 really active volunteers across the state. We're trying to get to 700 by Christmas, but we would love to reach like 5,000 supporters. So supporters can be any age. We need everyone to lock in on this issue. So please, if you are interested in supporting our work, either by signing a petition or submitting a comment to the Army Corps of Engineers on line 5 before the August 30th deadline, please just meet me at this table over here. We'll get your name on the clipboard, and we'll let you know how you can keep on supporting this movement and support young people along the way. Yeah, thanks for listening.
Awesome. Thank you all so much.
This is lightning talk, so I will get right into it and introduce our speakers. So Susie Seidelman is the director of Victura Communications, a consulting firm that supports nonprofits and foundations with their strategic communication needs. In 2017, Susie was hired to help Take Back My Meds Milwaukee develop their first strategic communications plan. In 2020, after several years of being instrumental to the campaign's growth and implementation of accessible and safe medication disposal boxes, Susie became the Take Back My Meds Coalition Director. Next, we have Bridget Brown, who leads the city's initiative's municipal support programs around coastal resiliency, water quality, water equity, and climate action. The city's support initiatives, coastal resiliency programs have provided engineering and financial support to over 100 U.S. Great Lakes coastal communities since launching in 2021. Pretty cool. Gavin Dennert is an emerging contaminant scientist with Wisconsin Sea Grant and the University of Wisconsin-Madison. As a postdoctoral fellow with the Wisconsin Department of Health Services, he helped set recommended health groundwater standards, including PFAS standards, and as a scientist, he continues conducting research on the impacts of emerging contaminants such as PFAS, pesticides, microplastics on aquatic systems.
Take Back My Meds, that's our logo. This is a bunch of folks who work on Take Back My Meds. The other thing I have to tell you all is that I usually give this presentation in about 20-25 minutes. I've got 10 minutes and I've had too much coffee, so I'm gonna talk real fast today. But the point of this slide is to show you that we are a very broad coalition of a lot of different types of stakeholders. We work with some of the biggest medical clinic and hospital systems in the state. We work with social justice organizations, environmental organizations, unions, foundations, first responders, fire departments. So there's a whole lot of different folks invested in this work. So I'm gonna run you through a quick scenario. You get hurt, you need pain medication. You don't use all of it. After a few days, you're feeling a lot better. What are you supposed to do? 75% of opioid addictions start with medication misuse. That is a very staggering statistic that is very, very real. We have some inclination that that number has actually gotten a little bit larger since the pandemic. So we also want to avoid this too, right? Bad situation. We live in the Lake Michigan Basin. If we have a municipal water system and we flush the toilet, where does that water go? So the water treatment facility, right? And what do they do there? They clean it and they flush it, the cleaned water, into the lake. So I'm from Milwaukee. We have arguably one of the most sophisticated water treatment systems in the world, thanks to the cryptosporidium outbreak in the 1990s. One of the only, we were talking about silver linings with climate change. This is one of the only silver linings of that cryptosporidium outbreak. But it's a really big one. And we don't have the ability to treat all of this stuff out. So we're not doing it. It's getting into the lake. We've got studies from the School of Freshwater Sciences showing that in outfalls all around the lake in places where they've tested, they're finding medical compounds in the water. What's Lake Michigan for us? The source of our drinking water. So we don't want that either. These are some big problems. We don't want this. Fish should not be made of pills, right? This is getting into ecosystems. It's harming the entire basin. That is not acceptable. But what are we supposed to do about that? So this is what we want to see done about this. This is a medication drop box. And at Take Back My Meds, we always say that the only responsible way to dispose of your unused medication is through a medication drop disposal box. But there are a lot of solutions on the market right now. I'm sure many of you have seen different pouches or bottles that you can dispose of your pills in. But we argue against those because where does all that stuff end up? The landfill. What happens that we know about in landfills?
Leachate.
Leachate, exactly. And where does some of that leachate end up? Groundwater, wastewater plant, Lake Michigan. So our goal is to make this as easy as possible for every Wisconsin resident. We've worked really hard in Milwaukee to make sure that we've got a network of drop boxes that covers so that no matter where you live in Milwaukee County, no matter what your transportation situation is, you can get on a bus, you can get on your bike, you can walk down the street, you can get in your car, and boom, you can go to a pharmacy and responsibly dispose of your medication. But it's not fair that we've just done that in Milwaukee. We want to make sure that everybody in the state has that opportunity. So, I'm hoping most of you know this, have seen this before. For those of you who haven't, I'm not like a super creepy, sexist, heteronormative person. This is a meme. And what I'm trying to show here is that the jilted lover on the side, scrappy coalitions begging for money to try to maintain a network of medication disposal boxes. That's what Take Back My Meds has been, and we've done a darn fine job of it, but we can't cover the whole state. We can't keep this thing running in perpetuity. And then we've got the flashy new person. EPR laws. What does EPR stand for? Extended Producer Responsibility, and that is exactly what we're working toward. When a pharmaceutical EPR law is passed. So let me back up one step. Extended Producer Responsibility. Exactly what it sounds like. You're a manufacturer. You make a product that at some point in that product's life cycle, it could hurt people. You should have an extended responsibility as the producer of that product to take care of it throughout its entire life cycle. These are laws that exist. They're in place all over the United States. I'll show you a map in a couple minutes, or less than a couple minutes, because I probably only got a couple minutes. I'm not gonna read this to you. I will gladly share these slides with anybody who wants them. But the point here is that when an EPR law is passed, pharmaceutical companies who make billions of dollars of profits become responsible in that place, whether it's a municipality, a county, or the state, for upholding the system by which the people in that jurisdiction now have the opportunity to walk into any pharmacy that decides, yeah, I want to be part of this. They're not forced, they get to decide. And they can dispose of their medication for free anytime that pharmacy is open. They can also do that in law enforcement offices. Those are the two places that the Drug Enforcement Agency has said can have medication disposal boxes. That's our law. But it's a lot more convenient, a lot better feeling for a lot of people to go to a pharmacy, a place that they're already going to anyway, than a police station. So we've really pushed for those pharmacy boxes. And also a thing that I find that most people really enjoy knowing about, the cost. So it's less than a penny per prescription, or 0.001% of profits for pharmaceutical companies to fund these programs. This is a map. The map shows blue states. Those blue states are ones that already have EPR laws passed statewide. So we don't need to invent any wheels. The wheel has been invented. We already have customizable municipal, county, and a Wisconsin state law ready to go as soon as we can get it in front of people who will work to pass it. We've got this done. And you might notice that one blue shape in the middle, just kind of taunting us. Illinois. Illinois has this. Illinois has this. If Illinois has this, we should have this. Right. This could be ours. When you look at this makes no sense, right? Like, just the people on the coast and Illinois can have this? Come on, we should have this too. So our strategy has been to work in the Lake Michigan Basin, to try to convince folks who work in municipal or county governments to pass an EPR ordinance. You can do this in your community. This is something you can do. What we really want is for this to get passed at the state level. So we've recently started to move our strategy toward also working, because what we've come to understand is that it's really hard to convince people to do this who have the ability to wield the levers of power. So what we're doing also is asking folks to pass a proclamation or a resolution stating that when we get this in front of the state, when it has a chance of passing, hopefully soon, that they will support it. It's showing that there's support all over the state for this already. So what I'm asking from you today is to help. You can join this coalition. You can talk to the folks in your communities who are in power, who are decision makers. You can build momentum for this in your town, in your county, and ultimately at the state level. We're gonna work to try to do this. We've got about another year and a half in which to try to make this happen. And that's what we're doing. So come and talk to me. I think I've run out of time to, yep, I'm out of time. No questions. Sorry.
You can ask them
Thanks everyone. Again, I just want to echo, it's really great to see everyone here today. It's great to be here today. I'm Bridget Brown with the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative. Also want to echo, really appreciate support that we've gotten from Fund for Lake Michigan, so really excited to see that group here today as well. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about the work that we're doing with cities throughout the basin on coastal climate adaptation. So first, just a little snippet of who we are. We are a multinational coalition of local elected officials. So we work in Canada, the US, we have a few tribal members as well. At this point, we represent more than 20 million residents in the basin through about 260 members. And we're really focused on that local level. So cities are on the front lines. They're the ones that have to deal with issues with their residents, with the environment. So we work with cities to help advance policy and advance local action to address socioeconomic and environmental issues. We have 4 strategic focus areas. I'm not going to dive into those because I don't have time, but I will just say for today, I'm going to talk about climate and coastal resilience. But we are also working in these other areas, including water equity and infrastructure. We do a lot with ecosystem, source water protection, water quality stuff. And then we're just getting into some work on economic transformation. So really looking at how we can transform our economies to a more water-based, greener, renewable energy, those types of things. Sarah did actually a really excellent job earlier talking about the coastal damages, so I won't spend a lot of time on this. I think we're all familiar with what we're experiencing in the Great Lakes from flooding and erosion. I just want to emphasize that that is having a really big impact on ecosystems and habitat. We've lost a lot of habitat in the Great Lakes region due to development as well as climate impacts. And then from the local level, that local municipal city perspective, this is having impacts on economies, both through lost opportunities for revenue, through tourism, through people living in your community, as well as to the amount of money that it costs to address the coastal issues. So huge investments required to deal with these challenges. So the Cities Initiative, we've started some coastal programs back in 2021, and this is to address some challenges that we saw that I'm going to kind of spin as opportunities today. So we saw some opportunities for an organization like ours that's positioned basin-wide, but with deep local ties as well, to really start to help in some areas. So we help facilitate connections between federal agencies and funders and local cities that need help and they need those resources. We support, through our partnerships, the design of innovative projects that protect communities. We want to advance habitat restoration in the Great Lakes, and we also see this as a huge opportunity to bring more investments to the Great Lakes. It's often sort of a forgotten region when we're talking about coastlines, but we have a lot of coastline in the Great Lakes. You know, it's not just the ocean coasts of the United States. And then we also, so the Cities Initiative, we do this programming, but we also do policy. So the more we can work directly with cities on these issues, the more data and information we can gather that can inform our policy and advocacy initiatives. So we can really push for change, push for more federal funding, those types of things. We do not do any of this alone. So we are a small, scrappy nonprofit of 10 staff. So we rely heavily on partnerships. I want to call out LNRP. We worked closely with LNRP when we launched our pilot program for coastal resilience in Wisconsin back in 2021. Lots of local community-based organizations, environmental organizations like that, regional planning agencies, state coastal programs, all of the funders you see on the top row there, as well as we don't have engineers or planners on staff at the city's initiative. We work with groups like Limnotech, Stantec, Smith Group, the groups that you see up here that bring the water science expertise. They bring the engineering expertise. They also bring funding acquisition expertise. We have a lot of partnerships that we could not do this work without. So I just want to stress that before I dive in. So we have two coastal programs, two big programs that we do. Through those programs, they're quite similar. We work to identify issues. So looking at those areas where you have like a road wiped out or the threat of a road wiped out, or you're a bluff and houses are falling, into the lake, habitat's been lost, those types of issues. Identifying those issues and designing sustainable nature-based. So as much as we can work with nature as possible, we use nature-based, sustainable, green kind of solutions. And to date, we have been engaged with and supported 75 projects throughout the region, and that number is growing. And then the final thing we do is we can't just plan a project. We need to get it funded, we need to get it built, we need to do something about perfect, thanks. We need to do something about the issues that these communities are facing. We need to help them protect their infrastructure, etc. So we need to bring in funding. Most of the cities we're working with cannot fund these projects on their own through local tax revenues. They require big federal investments. And so we work very closely with the cities to put these projects into federal funding applications. We've been really successful so far, thanks to Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, Inflation Reduction Act programs. So far, we've secured over $5 million for these projects, which is a pretty small number considering the number of projects. That number is growing. We have lots of outstanding applications. This work is not stopping, so it's just getting started. Because it's Lake Michigan Day, I will highlight our Lake Michigan projects. So you can see up on this map, we've got two programs, the Initiative for Resilient Great Lakes Coasts, which is a partnership with NOAA. And through that gets funding from the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. For that program, we have 10 projects in the Lake Michigan Basin. Those are the orange stars you see on the map. And then through National Fish and Wildlife Foundation's National Coastal Resilience Fund, as well as support from Fund for Lake Michigan and Herb Family Foundation, we have the Resilient Coastal Projects Initiative. And we have 28 projects in the Lake Michigan Basin through that program, and those are the yellow pins you see up there. And just to give a flavor of the kind of work that we're doing, this is the community of Lake Forest, Illinois on Lake Michigan. And this is the McCormick Ravine Bluff Restoration Project. So on the left, you can see how that bluff is failing, and that erosion will just keep continuing without a solution. And so we have worked with our partners and the community of Lake Forest to design, this is a rendering from the project designs, which will basically address this issue from in the water by adding fish habitat, slowing waves, all the way through the beach and up to the top of the bluff, by planting native plants that are deep-rooted, adding pollinator habitat, those types of solutions to really make this more of a thriving waterfront ecosystem that can more readily absorb the fluctuating water levels and high precipitation. So that project is now at 60% design ready status, meaning it's basic, or construction ready status, meaning we just need to get funding for final design and construction. So we're working with Lake Forest on that. And then one closer to home, I was sitting with our partners here from Two Rivers at the table here, and I'd say if you have questions about the details of this project, they are definitely the experts, and I encourage you to approach them today during networking time. But here's a picture of a outfall right along the coast where you see the traditional kind of riprap that we see a lot with the rocks along the coast. And we've been working with Two Rivers through several grants, several partnerships, to get this project off the ground. It's multifaceted. It's protecting their water treatment plant, stabilizing the beach, adding recreational opportunities along Mariners Trail, and also adding some pollinator habitat. So really trying to, again, look at a larger area that we can really have some positive ecosystem benefits while also protecting the community. And so I guess in summary, or to kind of close out here, we feel like we're having a lot of success. We're positioned as a region-wide organization to have a lot of impact and move a lot of projects forward. But there are still some key challenges that remain, and so we want to keep collaborating with all of you on kind of figuring some of this stuff out, but a few that I'll highlight is that what we're seeing is that cities have a high need for grant writing support. A lot of the communities we're working with are very small towns, villages. They don't have the capacity to compete against larger municipalities for some of these big federal grants, so they require support. They also have expressed concerns or hesitation to like manage grants and projects once those funds come in. So once you get the funding, you still have to write grant reports, manage budgets, manage contracts. All of that takes it takes people power, right? Which is challenging, you know, for local city economies. We are also concerned that the current federal funding that's been so great for our program will go away after 2026, and so that's something we're advocating for that to continue. And then just, I think one of the things that stands out to me the most, this is a great opportunity to have some examples of these like nature-based resilience projects in the Great Lakes. We don't have a lot of those yet. So with that, I'm getting to wrap it up. I want to say thank you, and here's my contact info, and I hope to talk to you all. Thanks so much.
My name's Gavin Daynard. Thank you guys for having me here. Really appreciate the opportunity to kind of talk about some of the research that we do and kind of tell you a little story about some of the research. So I'm really happy that Sarah was able to kind of talk at the beginning, and Sarah may or may not have heard some of this stuff already. But this is a story about kind of how we have done some tribally driven research, and then it's going to focus on PFAS in the ceded territories. So PFAS is, we're going to switch a little bit difference here, jump from climate change to a different contaminant. So this story starts with the Voight Intertribal Task Force. So this is a task force that's built up of about 10 or 11 Ojibwe tribes that span the ceded territories. This spans from the 1854 treaty, 1937, 1936, and 1942. And this will kind of span the range from northern Minnesota, all of northern Wisconsin, and then the Upper Peninsula, and even a little bit into the mitten part of Michigan as well. And this task force really is brought together to help plan hunting, gathering, and fishing rights for the tribal communities throughout the ceded territory. So how do I kind of fall into this? So the Voight Task Force had done a few testing to see if PFAS was in particular animals, one being Maiingen, which is wolf, and they found out that there was some PFAS found in their livers. Now, what they didn't know is what PFAS were, how to read some of these things, and so they kind of asked me to come up there and just give a 20-minute talk about what do we know about PFAS, and you know what don't we know is probably an easier way to start. And so I'm just going to kind of give the really short version of how this 20-minute talk of where it started. So PFAS are per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, and these are a man-made set of chemicals. There's anywhere between 5,000 to 14,000, to some people argue there's millions of these different chemicals that are out there, but they're all just like family together. They're found in firefighting foams, they're found in non-stick coating, they're found in anything that can be stain resistant, heat resistant, oil resistant, etc. And part of the reason we care about them is if you're exposed to them at high levels for long periods of time, they can have negative health impacts on people. Particularly, they're found in Wisconsin, they're found across the nation, so they're not just in small areas. And where we come into play is they can be found in plants and animals. And I ended the talk with this map, which focused in on where is PFAS found? And as you can tell, this is 2022, so this is a couple years now. And we really focus on this middle part of Wisconsin where the ceded territories are, that there are a lot of gaps. So there wasn't a lot of research that had been done, especially in these ceded territories. And as I started to mention, this was a 20-minute talk, right? I came up there, just thought I'd go in, give a little presentation, and then answer some questions. It turned into about a 2 to 3 hour discussion of asking questions of like, what are PFAS? Why do we care about them, etc.? What do we know? And for majority of it, unfortunately, a lot of the answers were, we don't know. You know, science doesn't know where, you know, how does it impact humans? How does it get into our different plants and animals? There was a lot of questions that we just couldn't answer. And so what I did is went back to the drawing board, sat down with a whole bunch of collaborators, including Glyphwick, and we wrote kind of a proposal. We took all the information that everybody at the Voight Task Force was asking, and we just tried to write it into one scientific proposal that, you know, we could hope for funding. We took that back to the Voight Task Force, and we said, here's what I kind of put together. What should we change? Did I, you know, kind of get everything that you were thinking at? And we went back and forth once or twice to try to figure out, to make sure like this is the research that is not only help the tribes, but will actually like is driven by that. And so we ended up getting this research kind of done, which is really going to focus on PFAS and its bioaccumulation across the ceded territories. And this is an ongoing project, right? How many minutes do I get? Oh, I got plenty of time. I was worried. So this is a project that works with, as I said, there's 10 Ojibwe tribes. And there's about 3 or 4 different main points, and I'll kind of walk through where we are. So the first question that they brought up was, well, where are PFAS in the ceded territories? We know there's a whole bunch of gaps, but are the gaps because there aren't PFAS there, or is it because we just haven't tested for it yet? And so what we decided to do is sample 50 different lakes across the ceded territories. So we asked the task force, we said, hey, you know, what lakes would you like us to sample first that we can kind of explore? Well, they gave us a list of 600 lakes that have, you know, very high prevalence of either walleye or manoomin or wild rice in there. And unfortunately, every test for PFAS is about $500–600, so we can't sample all 600 lakes. So what we tried to do is we focused on 50 of them that either had the highest harvest rates of manoomin or the highest harvest rates of walleye, or, you know, if there was particular lakes that, you know, different tribes or bands would prefer. So moral of this story, just to kind of point out, is we tried to do a pretty wide span to kind of hit all 3 different areas. The yellow dots are the ones that are going to kind of say like we found PFAS, but we really didn't find it at very high levels. So those would be the lakes that I would kind of say, you know, it's there, but it seems to be pretty safe. The best news about this is all those white dots that exist, those are lakes that have no PFAS detected in it, which is really amazing because you hear a lot of the times like PFAS is everywhere, PFAS could be really bad. Well, it's not everywhere in ceded territory, so that was great news. But we did highlight, there's a couple in red, there's a couple in some orange, and those were the lakes that, you know, had higher levels, the one that maybe we should do a little bit more work into. But before we get to that, we can talk about one of my favorite projects. And the second kind of part of this was they kept asking, well, okay, we know it can be in fish, right? That's what we've always been told, but like what other plants and animals could it potentially be in? And every year, as part of the traditions is to go maple sapping and to produce maple syrup, maple sugar. And so there was this question is like, well, can PFAS get in maple sap? And we had no idea. There was one study that was done in 2016 that kind of looked at it, but never found anything in there. So we decided to kind of start this exploration. And so I'm not going to ask you to look at any of these because this is what happens when you get all the science into it. But we sampled 10 different maple sugar bush areas, and sugar bushes are kind of exploring kind of a harvestable area for maple sap. And we did find PFAS in the sap, unfortunately. But the best news is we only found 2 of those 14,000, which is great. And we found them at very low levels. And the best news is that none of the PFAS was coming from the tapping equipment that they were using. You know, it was just being able to actually be drawn up, most likely from the groundwater. Now, we brought this back to the task force and kind of asked them, like, well, what do you want to do next with this? And they asked, well, if it can get into sap, how does this affect the syrup, right? What's that next process into it? And we kind of explored this then into this idea of like, okay, can PFAS get into syrup? And short answer, yes, PFAS can get into syrup. But again, the two best news is we didn't find a lot of different PFAS, and we didn't find it at very high levels. So, and I know I'm gonna run out of time. This is what happens. When you say this 10-minute, 20-minute talk, we're all used to it now. But the best part about this is all of this research is continuously driven by the Void Task Force. We listen to their ideas, we take their ideas, we go out and then bring it right back to them and let them tell us where they would like us to kind of go next. And then I guess what I'll just end it at then is, if you want to know the next 3, 4, 5 parts of it, you can come find me. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Please make sure that you check back regularly for new content.